New England quarterback Mac Jones has been the talk of Patriots OTAs after showing up slimmer and trimmer. The team reportedly ecstatic with what they've seen from Jones this offseason. He's been beating coaches to the practice facility, organizing workouts with his receivers, including new addition Devontae Parker, the once Big Mac, coming off a rookie season that saw him pass for just over 3,800 yards, 22 touchdowns, 13 picks. Here's Kendrick Bourne on a more svelte-looking Jones.
Yeah, Mac, and he's also in shape. Everything you said, yeah, is way better, and he's in the best shape of his life. I think he's been here all off season with Moses, so he looks really good. His stomach is gone.
Yeah, I think every year you want to do like a self-diagnosis of how you felt for the games, you know, your body fat, all that stuff. And for me, just cleaning up my diet, and I've learned more this off season than I probably ever have about nutrition, sleep, wellness, all that stuff.
So less Big Macs for Big Mac. Lots of good feelings and fun at spring OTAs. You hear them laughing and having a good time. For more on the Patriots, let's bring back Tyler Sullivan, CBS Sports NFL writer and reporter. Tyler, what are your thoughts on the slimmer, trimmer Jones?
Well, it needed to happen. I mean, again, this is somebody who, it's like all rookies. I mean, you go, of course, over the course of any sport, really. You go to the NBA, NFL, all these guys that come into the league, they're still babies. They're still young kids. You kind of got to get rid of that baby fat. You go into a little bit more of a professional diet. You start to take it a little bit more seriously. And I think that's exactly what Mac Jones should be doing. I mean, we've seen this with a lot of guys. You know, they change their diet. They're starting to work with dietitians. They get their own personal chefs. This is something that I think Mac Jones should do. Again, this isn't the old school days where they're having some cigarettes on the sidelines or anything like that. This is, again, you're taking care of your body. It is a investment that you're putting into on a week in and week out basis. And for Mac Jones last season, a couple of times there, he was getting banged up. I mean, at the beginning of the season, I think he was dealing with a little bit of something in the lower body, and then towards the tail end, I thought he was getting banged up a little bit too with that offensive line. So this is something that, again, he needs to take care of now over the course of the offseason. Recoup, get yourself in peak physical condition, because that will make you last much longer over the course of an 18-week schedule, and also make yourself a more productive quarterback during each and every down in every series when you're playing in those games too.
I mean, we've all seen the picture of Tom Brady, right, before the Combine, when, you know, that photo of him, he's tried to have it scrubbed from the internet. But, I mean, maybe he's investing in the TB12 method. Who knows with Jones? You heard the stats there, 3,800 yards, just over, 22 touchdowns. He led all rookie quarterbacks in those categories. I mean, he's been mentioned already by folks at NFL Network as a dark horse candidate for MVP. I mean, so when you look at Jones, what's the floor, what's the ceiling for 2022?
I mean, Bill Belichick would certainly love if he gets an MVP out of number 15 overall pick in Mac Jones. Again, that would be something that I think everybody in New England would enjoy, especially after the last couple of years here, where you're still wondering about, is he the guy? Is he gonna take that second year leap? But if he does live up to his potential, I believe, if you're talking about gold jacket level of, you know, the peak performance of Mac Jones, I think you're looking at something similar to Drew Brees. You know, Mac Jones is not a mobile quarterback in the new age sense, like a Josh Allen who we were talking about in the previous segment. He's not anybody like that, but he can move around the pocket well. He's a pure passer. The biggest thing is his accuracy. He can throw it pretty much anywhere on the football field that he wants to. And more than anything, he's intelligent. He has a high football IQ, which is something that I think the New England Patriots were really fascinated with in the pre-draft process last year. So for me, if he is able to reach all of these heights, you're talking about someone who is looking a little bit like Drew Brees. If you want to come down a little bit to something a little bit more realistic, which I think is probably more the case here, I think you're looking at a Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins type of guy. Certainly talented, certainly able to get you wins in the National Football League, but other things around him will need to be perfect for them to truly contend in the postseason, truly contend for a Super Bowl. He needs to have a number one wide receiver, needs to have a good coaching staff like he does, needs to have a strong offensive line. He's able to win, but he needs more things around him. It's not like Tom Brady where you can surround him with basically nothing at certain points of his tenure in New England, and they're still winning Super Bowls. I don't think they're ever going to get that from Mac Jones, but I do think that you can get a Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr type of player and still be able to contend for championships. And then if he hits the floor, I mean, you're looking at what? The latest version of Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, immobile type of quarterback that regresses after a somewhat promising first year and really never recovers.
Well, it certainly doesn't look like that with the way that he's kind of come into the second season with OTAs. And hey, if you're going to hand me that Kirk Cousins bag, I'll take that comparison, absolutely. All right, this Patriots offense, they've been middle of the pack or worse for each of the past 3 seasons. The big question going into 2022 is who's going to be calling the plays. Bill Belichick has yet to name a new offensive coordinator since Josh McDaniels went to the Raiders. Is Bill going to be calling plays here, Tyler?
It'll be interesting if he does. You know, again, that's a wild card here. That is certainly, I feel like, on the table, but I do have some concerns with that too. I mean, again, if Bill Belichick is coming down to call plays for this offense, well, then he's going to be stretched a little bit too thin. How does that impact the overall team? Again, you should be overseeing the operations and kind of pulling the strings from the sideline, not actually being someone that's getting the strings pulled. So for me, again, that would be fascinating to see how that goes with Bill Belichick running the offense from a play calling standpoint, but I don't know if that's legitimately possible, again, just because of what he's doing for the rest of the roster there and the overall roster construction. Even on the defensive side of the ball, there is no defensive coordinator in name. They do have his son Steve Belichick and obviously Gerard Mayo, but there's still no clear-cut leader on that side of the ball either, so I do think he kind of needs to be still up on that perch. The one thing that's concerning, though, is that play calling duties, because if it's not Belichick, it's probably going to be Joe Judge or Matt Patricia. In either way, that's extremely concerning. Unlike previous times when the Patriots didn't have a quote-unquote offensive coordinator, you kind of knew who was running the show, whether it was Josh McDaniels before he had that title, Bill O'Brien before he had that title. You knew that those were going to be the guys. Now we have no idea, and even if it's Joe Judge or Matt Patricia, we don't know what kind of guy they're going to be in terms of offensive play calling. Neither one of them have done it in the NFL. Matt Patricia has play calling experience, but that's on the defensive side of the ball. Joe Judge doesn't have any. And Joe Judge is working with the quarterbacks this offseason. He's working with Mac Jones. And I think that that's the one that should be alarming the most if we're just looking at prior history. You look at when he was the head coach of the New York Giants, they were 31st his 2 years as head coach in total yards and total points. And over that stretch, they had Daniel Jones, another first-round quarterback. I think if you asked anybody who watches the NFL over the last few years, you would say that Daniel Jones has either regressed or he's plateaued. He has not ascended as a first-round quarterback you would hope to see him do over his career. Hasn't happened yet. You've even had Giants ownership say that they've done everything possible to screw that quarterback up. And one of those things that they screwed up in was putting him with Joe Judge. And now you have Mac Jones with Joe Judge, and I just don't know how that's going to look. I think that might hurt the development of Mac Jones if it's the same kind of coach that we saw in New York lead an abysmal offense, now running the show here in New England.
Well, and it's certainly getting late in the process as well. So, I mean, you've got to have somebody at least part of the duties, share the duties. Who knows what Bill's planning to do. But as you mentioned, a going concern as to what's going to happen with this offense and how productive they can be depending on who's calling the plays. Okay, Malcolm Butler, Jabril Peppers, Ty Montgomery. Few of the signings that they've had this offseason for you. What's the best offseason move the Patriots have made?
We'll stick with the offense. I think it's Devontae Parker, and it really just comes back to Mac Jones. I mean, again, when you have a young quarterback, you want everything to go right. You want to set up everything imaginable so he can develop the best way possible. We've expressed our concerns about the coaching staff. One thing that we can't really express too much concern about is the overall talent around him. Again, they don't have a clear-cut number one. I'm not going to say Devontae Parker is this legit number one type of receiver, but he's certainly better than what they had last year. And it's certainly better than what they've had really in the last few years. And I think his presence as somebody who can stretch the field is a legitimate threat to an opposing defense that they at least have to account for. I think that makes life easier for the rest of the roster. It kind of slots Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, Jacoby Myers, Tyquan Thornton, the rookie second-round pick. I think it slots them into more realistic roles, and especially with the tight ends being so prevalent in a Patriots offense, with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry coming off a promising year. Jonnu Smith needs to kind of rebound off of a poor season. But there's a lot of talent there in the passing game for Mac Jones to succeed, and I do think that Devontae Parker's presence alone makes things a little bit more organized in that offense.
With former first-rounder N'Keal Harry not even at OTAs, I mean, you look at Parker there. I mean, Parker's going to be the one that's probably going to be slotting into his position. Who knows what the future holds for Harry at this point. Okay, losses on this team include J.C. Jackson, Chase Winovich, Kyle Van Noy. When you look at who's left this team, what's been the most questionable move this offseason?
Well, the low-hanging fruit here is Cole Strange in the first round, right? The guard out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. But I do think that you can put that one off to the side a little bit. If they like the player, they like the player. We'll find out in a few years if that is actually a questionable move by them, even though, it had us scratching our heads on draft night. For me, the biggest thing with this team is that they have not replaced J.C. Jackson, who signed a massive deal with the Los Angeles Chargers. Every time the Patriots have moved on from a cornerback, their top cornerback, which has been relatively common over the course of Belichick's tenure over the last few years, there has been a guy in place that you can point to say, okay, there's a chance that he ascends to be the number one guy. When it was Malcolm Butler, who was the Super Bowl hero, he ascended after Darrelle Revis left to be the number one guy. And then when Malcolm Butler left, you had Stephon Gilmore already waiting in the wings to truly be that number one defensive player of the year type of player. Then when you traded away Stephon Gilmore last year, you had J.C. Jackson as a legit all-pro corner playing for you right now. I don't know what it's going to look like in week one, but if you're kind of trying to pencil in that depth chart at the moment, it looks like it's probably going to be Malcolm Butler, and that's not the Malcolm Butler that we saw a few years ago when he's picking off Russell Wilson in the Super Bowl or being a Pro Bowler in the years prior to that. It's a totally different player who barely even played last season because he was dealing with off-the-field issues. He semi-retired, and now he's coming back. It's a totally different player, but he's being asked to be in that same role, which I think is a tall ask for him in this Patriots secondary. So for me, when you're in a conference like the AFC that we've seen load up with quarterback talent, with wide receivers coming into not only in the conference, but in the division, when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in one offense, I don't know how you're going to keep up with those type of players. And when you're going up against Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and Jamison Crowder, I don't know how you're keeping up with them with that secondary as it's currently constructed, because they really don't have that number one shutdown guy.
Yeah, Malcolm Butler brought in Terrence Mitchell, also signed on a free agent deal from Houston 1 year for $3 million. So he's another addition to the secondary. The Patriots had 10 draft picks this past draft. You mentioned Cole Strange. They had 3 fourth-rounders. When you look at the rookie class overall, I mean, who are you betting on to have the biggest impact here?
I don't even know if I'm betting on it, but it's more just he has to be good, is Tyquan Thornton. And it's not even for the 2022 season. It's for the overall approach of the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick over the last few years. The second-round pick out of Baylor, it just has to work. You look at this history of this team drafting wide receivers, it is absolutely not pretty. I mentioned it a little while ago. N'Keal Harry, the 2019 first-round pick, has not lived up to that whatsoever. He requested a trade last season, hasn't happened, but his future with the team is looking bleak. Just for a morale of the front office and the morale of this developmental front office and this group and these scouts and these evaluators with this team, the Tyquan Thornton pick needs to work. He has something that the Patriots desperately need in speed. He's the fastest wide receiver in terms of 40 time at the NFL scouting combine. He certainly brings that, but he is a skinnier type of player. He's not this big, muscular type of player. He does need to put on a little bit of weight there. But for me, Tyquan Thornton needs to work out for this New England Patriots team. He can show some flashes and doesn't have to be this absolute stud Jamar Chase type of player in year one. But if he can stretch the field, actually use his speed to their advantage, I think that will help the Patriots in the long term.
Tough start to the season for the Pats. 3 of their first 4 games are on the road at Miami, Pittsburgh, and then Green Bay. In those road games, home to the Ravens is where they come in between there. What stretch of the games is a concern for you when you look at their schedule?
Yeah, I think it's later on in the season. And if you look at their schedule, there's a primetime gauntlet kind of bunched all together later in the year. That's weeks 12 through 16. I mean, they're going up against the Minnesota Vikings on Thanksgiving in Minnesota. You're facing the Bills for the first time. You're going to Arizona to face the Cardinals. You're going to Las Vegas to face Josh McDaniels and the Las Vegas Raiders. To me, that is just an absolute onslaught of 4 primetime games for them. And then at the end of it, when they're not in primetime, they have to go to Cincinnati to face actually, they're facing the Cincinnati Bengals in Gillette Stadium, but still, the reigning AFC champions coming into your building. I just think that is a absolutely brutal stretch there. The moment you feel like you can get a sigh of relief after taking on that emotional game of Josh McDaniels versus Bill Belichick. You're going and facing Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and all those boys in Cincinnati. I mean, I don't know what they did to the schedule makers, but boy, that is a gut punch coming out of that primetime gauntlet.
All right, well, since 2003, the Patriots have only had one season where they had less than double-digit wins. So in terms of their record, what do you think 2022 holds in store? And when you look at a futures bet, I mean, what are you kind of looking at there?
Yeah, I think they go 10-7, 9-8. I think that's possible for them, and again, that 10-7 is them sweeping the Miami Dolphins. And for Tua Tagovailoa's criticisms that he gets, he has swept the Patriots throughout the course of his career. He swept them last year in their 2 matchups. So again, it's kind of rare if you're saying, oh, they're going to sweep the Dolphins to go 10-7. So maybe it's 9-8, whatever you want to put it there. But ultimately, I do think that 10-7 is roughly the mark there for the Patriots. But if you're looking for a futures bet in that same breath, I do think that there's value in them winning the division at 4-1. I do think that there is something to be said for maybe Mac Jones living up to that MVP type of leap in year 2. Who knows what could happen there? And obviously, the Buffalo Bills are 1 injury away under center from things absolutely derailing for them. So again, 4-1, I would guess that is probably the best odds that Bill Belichick has had in the last 20 years to win his own division with the Patriots. So for me, again, you're really banking on Bill Belichick being right with all of the pieces that he's put together, all the chess moves that he's made. You're banking on him being right with all the things that he's done, and you're banking on a Mac Jones type of, not a seismic leap, but a noticeable leap in year 2. And you could say, all right, the Patriots, they were the number 1 seed at one point last season. Maybe they actually do make a run at the Bills here for the division. And if you're sitting at a 4-1 ticket, that's pretty good value.
He is CBS Sports NFL writer reporter Tyler Sullivan tackling the first half of the AFC East for us here on the Football Happy Hour. Thanks, Tyler. In terms of the Patriots schedule, you heard that going concern near the back end of the Patriots schedule for Tyler. You see them Cardinals, Raiders, against Josh McDaniels, Sunday Night Football, then the Bengals, then the Dolphins, then the Bills. That is quite a finish to the season for the Patriots. Tyler's still thinking they're good for a 10-7 record.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.